I welcome you all again. And today, the second session that we have is Masterpiece of Heritage Art, for which I would like to request Ms. Rima Hooja ma'am and Mr. Pratap Verma sir to please step up on the stage. Pratap Verma sir, I'm so sorry. Can we have a huge round of applause, everyone? This is not happening, Adi. This will happen after some time. I mean, it's been exchanged for this session. Yes. So, Ms. Rima Hooja ma'am, she's an archaeologist, historian, and a writer. She has a PhD from Cambridge University. She's currently the director of the Maharaja Savai Man Singh Museum, Jaipur. Director Jaigarh Fort Trustee Maharaja Ganga Singh Ji's Trustee Bikaner. She's the Managing Trustee Jaipur Virasat Foundation, Visiting Faculty School of Planning and Architecture Delhi, Adjunct Faculty Ahmedabad University, and Vice President ICOMOS India. She's also a former member of India's National Monuments Authority, Government of India, and of the Central Advisory Board for Archaeology, Government of India. She's a fellow of the Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland and a distinguished international academician of Minnesota University, USA. She has been associate professor at Kota Open University, visiting fellow at the Institute of Development Studies, and so many other accolades that are to her name. She's also authored several books. To name few, we have Ahar Culture and Beyond, Environment Degradation, Crusader for Self-Rule, and the list goes on. Ma'am, it is an absolute privilege to have you amongst us. Mr. Pratap Verma, sir, he is a very versatile personality, and he's an life and business coach, mentor, and storyteller, MP Government Relations. He's the chief advisor to Confederation of MP for Industry, Services, and Trade, and is a solution-based inspirational speaker who provides value multiplication to individuals and organizations. Now, over to you, respected guests. We shall ask you to begin the session.
Hello to all, and very good morning to Rima ji. The first thing is, we just met in the morning for the first time and just chatted for a few minutes, and she told me she has come with a masterpiece. This is at the Jaipur Court, and she's director of that museum. So it has collections of Rajasthan art, and the commentary and the stories have been given by various scholars from all over the world, including Miranali and also Giles Tolston. So these are the two people who are consultant to this particular publishing of masterpieces. And I would now request Rima ji to at least tell about 4 or 5 masterpieces with their stories. So that would be very nice, so people know what Rajasthan art is all about.
Thank you, Pratap ji. And as I start, I would like to express my gratitude to my friends and colleagues of the Society for Environment and Culture and Environment. Chalu hai? Chalu hai, awaaz nahi aa rahi? Okay. So again, I will again express my thanks and gratitude. It is always a pleasure to be back at Bhopal. And I think this time that one was away, I mean, yes, there was a virtual conference last year. We've had lots of online things, and that has never been the same. So it's lovely to be talking to a live audience. Right. But it is lovely, in fact, very interesting for me to talk about a book which has just come out, which talks about the masterpieces at the Maharaja Savai Man Singh Second Museum in Jaipur, in the City Palace, Jaipur. And it's called Masterpieces of the Jaipur Court. Now, very briefly, before I tell you about the favorites, this book has 76 items or objects that have been selected out of a large collection. The museum that we have in Jaipur was started in 1959 out of the personal collection of the former Jaipur ruling family. So once Jaipur became part of independent India, they had a little private museum,
Right.
and they gave their material. But in 59, a public trust was made, or a private trust was made, and we used the old buildings to display this material. Usually, choosing a masterpiece is something, it's a personal decision.
Right.
What you might like, what you might like. But there are some things that are outstanding in any case.
True.
So 76 outstanding pieces are there. But we have a very interesting way of deciding which go into this. So again, there have been other books on the collection. They've been published in the last few years. Several were published in black and white many, many years ago. But in this case, it's not written, I'm the director there, but it's not written by me or by my other colleagues whose names are here, Dr. Mrinalini Venkateshwaran and Dr. Giles Tillotson. It's written by over 40, in fact 48 authorities in their own field, including some of our curators, talking about 76 items. So it's a different take, because sir, we were having a session on birds before this and birding. Now there are paintings which will have birds in the background or trees in the background, but then there are also, in the museum, we have got some close-ups. The famous Mansoor of Jahangir's time has done one of a bird of prey. So an expert writing about it will maybe highlight features in a different way. They might talk about the color of the wings. They might pick on something else. There might be a shield, a dhal, which has got some other story on it, that you and I, when we go to a museum, there is so much to see. But when someone points it out and says, so there are flowers here, and they say, look, these larkspurs are very pale in color, if they're real. I think they are. They are real. There we are. I know, sir. And so they are a different color. And somebody who is an expert will then tell you the name also. So we have that option. Now you might wonder, 48 people, 76 items, they'll go on and on. No. We've got a kind of 500 to 700 word limit. So in that, you have to think of what you want to say and then say it. And just one or two of the things that we have here, they range from old maps of when Jaipur was made 300 years ago, almost 300 years ago, 1727. So we are in 2022, 295 years ago. There is a map talking about the pilgrimage route to Badrinath. There is another map of the inside of Delhi's Red Fort with material written in Devanagari. Why? Because it was made for or by the painters of Savai Jai Singh II's own court. So there are 3 maps associated with Jai Singh. There is a map of Surat, a large map, which shows the sea and the river, and then all of Surat with its gates and gardens and water. It's a very interesting, again, Farsi and Hindi, Devanagari, are the 2 scripts used. This is just one part. Then there are paintings. Those, of course, are visually appealing. There are things from the weapons collection, but not just weapons. So there are Phool Katari with a Qatar with a flower on one end. But there is also a child's helmet in gold with Koftgiri on it. So this is a range, and of course, manuscripts. Now, I noticed that we have a musical instruments displayed in Vagarth also. We've got some manuscripts. The average visitor going to any collection tends to walk past the manuscripts. I would do that myself unless you draw my attention to something. So what we have here is a very interesting thing in Persian called the Chuhanami. It's got a longer Muse Garba same word for it, which is telling a story that we didn't know why we have it. It's a very nice piece to display. But it's a lot of mice with one evil cat.
I believe you have a lot of cats
I
with
have
you.
a lot of cats, sir.
60 to be precise.
More than 60. I run a shelter called Animal Care Trust. So I live inside the shelter with the cats. Okay. So for me, the fact that the cat is the villain of the piece is not a very nice thing. But the mice are the heroes and the cat is the villain. But then we realized, why is this in the Jaipur court? You see, a collection, I can take a collection from here and it'll be fine, but to understand it, this was probably used to teach the young princes Farsi. It's a very basic primer in Farsi. Of course, the villain cat gets, there's a twist to the tale here. In most, the cat is punished. In this one, the cat is put to death by the mice. But this is just one of the many examples of how text, images, textiles are used to tell the story of the rich collection, cultural collection
Right.
of the museum.
You're talking about the shortness of the stories. The best one I know of is a proposal from a boy to a girl, love you, and she said regret.
No, ours are not that short. We have a few more words than that in the word limit.
And we have Meera Das here. She is our main person on heritage,
Yes.
cultural, this thing in Bhopal. So now I would.
No, I wish I had brought a presentation. So, for example, now we don't have anything from Bhopal here, but we have a gold-plated gun, 19th century, with Koftgiri on it, and it is a Joseph Lang revolver. Now, to do Koftgiri work, which is metal work, in gold, on a gold gun, is not that easy. The gun was presented by the then Nawab, the third Nawab, I think, of Tonk, to the ruler of Jaipur. So every piece will have its own history. Why is it there? Who is it there for? I think people are too far away, and I will probably... Is it showing up there? Oh, good. Then I can show you more. So this is one of the boats used in the Dev Julni Gyaras. Oh, I'm so happy. Then I can show you more. So, closer, please do. Just use the images. Thank you, Miraji. This is a Chinese robe. Now, this is very interesting because one of the rulers of Jaipur was a pioneering photographer. Thank you, Miraji.
Give it to me.
Okay, okay.
I'll show you.
Pratap ji will hold it up. Other pages also. Now, Maharaja Savai Ram Singh II, who was at the period where almost all our princely states are beginning to modernize. You know, the late 19th century. He also went to Calcutta. He's a photographer. We can go to another image, sir. He went to Calcutta because he was a dedicated photographer also. That's not why he went. He obviously went because the British were there and you have a relationship with the British. But he is taking photographs at that time on glass plates. He develops them himself. He is one of the pioneering photographers of India. But he also picked up that Chinese robe in Calcutta during his visit. And it's a typical imperial robe with the dragon symbol. Now, in this case, the quilt, the dulai and the workmanship on it, ek aur kuch le lijiye. What the Jaipur material has, by this period, by the 18th century when the material is being kept in Jaipur, because their older capital was Amer. And when they moved to Jaipur, that old capital remains. This is from the Chuhanami. So when the capital moves, it's a bit like, you know, old houses. Old Bhopal and then new Bhopal is built. And I believe your father had a role in making new Bhopal.
When we came to Bhopal in 56, he was given the charge of making this as the capital of Madhya Pradesh. He was administrator of Bhopal, but he was secretary, capital projects, PWD, all department together to make it a green city.
Right. Well, it is a green city. It's a beautiful city. One always admires the drive into it. But just like when from old Bhopal you have a new Bhopal, now you have a much more modern, expanding everywhere Bhopal. If you have two houses, you never empty the first completely until you need to. So in the same way, that is, sir, maybe another image. In the same way, from Amer, the Dhundar royal family, the Kachwahas is their clan, Dhundar is the kingdom. So when they move to Jaipur, a lot of things get left behind, including carpets. We have a few here. This is the map of Agra. This map is like all the maps of Jaipur, more or less of the Jaipur rulers, same period. 18th century. About 1720, 1740, 50. It's very old. It does show the gullies, mohallas, the havelis are marked. This is roughly the time period of Maharaja Savai Jai Singh II, who died in 1743. And he is, I won't go into all because of time, but starts off as a young 10-year-old Maharaja at the court of Aurangzeb. The title, officially on papers, we know that the title comes with Muhammad Shah giving him the title formally by a paper in 1712 or thereabouts. But the legend is that this 10-year-old whose father has died fighting in Kohat on the northwest frontier becomes the ruler. He's at Amer. Jaipur hasn't been founded. So he is the Kachwaha clan ruler with his capital at Amer, and the kingdom is Dhundar. And the 10-year-old is told to come towards the south of the country, towards Burhanpur and the Deccan, to join the imperial forces under one of the Shehzadas. Now, the first time that the story goes, that this young Raja meets the emperor, who is an old man, and as Aurangzeb aged, he was getting even shorter tempered. Maybe he found, people couldn't follow what he was saying, whatever. So he got up from the court, from the throne, from the takht, held the hands of this boy, both hands, and he said, now, one little footnote here. The Amer family had been close to the Mughals. Raja Man Singh is talked about, the first Raja Man Singh. He went to Kabul, Kandahar, Kabul, Zabul as it used to be, Ghazni, conquered the tribes there. The Panchranga that we have at the Jaipur, that was the former flag, came from the colors of the pennants of the defeated Afghan rulers, local chiefs, which was given to the Badshah, who then said, you have brought these belong to you. No. After that, Mirza Raja Jai Singh, the first, was the one who was responsible for a lot of campaigning in the Deccan area, and he's the one who then persuaded Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj to come to the court and gave his own word of honor that you would not be harmed. Now, Mirza Raja Jai Singh himself never came back to Agra at that time. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj came to Agra, was received, and Mirza Raja Jai Singh's son, Kunwar Ram Singh, who later becomes Mirza Raja Ram Singh I, received him. Then we all know from our history books that when Aurangzeb and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj met at court, it was an unsuccessful meeting, and Shivaji Maharaj turned his back and walked out, and there was this thing of capture him and everything. So Ram Singh stepped forward and said, my father has given his word. आप बंदी बना सकते हैं, पर जान की हिफाजत तो करनी है, sort of thing. Now, after that, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj eventually comes away from Agra. Hence the map of Agra also. But the story from the Agra end and the Jaipur and the Amer end is that young Kunwar, not so young, Kunwar Ram Singh allowed the escape to happen and made sure that nobody followed. And there is a letter in the Bikaner archives, which has been quoted, in which Aurangzeb is furious. He takes away several titles of Jai Singh, takes away several titles of Ram Singh, and he said something like, if Ram Singh had not, he says to Jai Singh, if he had not been your beta, your son, I would have skinned him alive. But out of all the things that your family has been associated, so let him stay out of my sight. So that was the reason why the Amer family had fallen into disgrace in a sense, and they never quite made it up because Ram Singh's son died in action, Krishan Singh, and grandson was Bishan Singh or Vishnu Singh, whose son was the founder of Jaipur, Raja Jai Singh. So when the 10-year-old went in front of the emperor's thing was कि भाई पिछले कुछ पीढ़ियों से your family have not been true to me. They might be fighting under my banner. What shall I do with you? तुम्हारे साथ क्या करूं? And this young boy had the wits to make an answer. Because if you think of a 10-year-old who suddenly asked, even by a headmaster or a headmistress or a principal, what shall I do with you? You for a minute are taken aback. And this boy apparently said, now this is the historian in me saying apparently. The story is he said. So let's go with the story. Ki when a Rajput marries, he takes one hand of the bride in a Gatbandhan and says he will look after her for life. You have, Your Majesty, you have taken both my hands. Now whether you kill me or not kill me or what you do, it's up to you. Why should I bother? So Aurangzeb laughed, one of the few times when he is amused, and he looked at his court and he said, look, this man, this 10-year-old, this man is more than all of you. ये एक जैसे आप लोग आदमी हो, ये जिसको कहते हैं ना शेर नहीं सवा शेर. So he is Savai. And so the title of Savai comes from there. Now, Savai comes from there. कि एक नहीं सवा. And that is why even now, in the private home, they will have the old flag of Jaipur, but they will have that little quarter flag to show Savai whenever a direct descendant is there. So these are little stories which come out from the objects. And the point, Pratapji, we were talking before this, because we've had a very short time to, discuss with each other. And I said, it's like Bhopal is an old city. There's a new part and there's an old part. So maybe a few more images as we are talking from here. But again, there are so many stories within stories. And like with the bird session, when children, yes, this is a helmet made for a child. And it looks like a pagdi. And it's used for ceremonial purposes. It's not going into battle. So each of these, when you look at them, they have a story in themselves. And then if we think in terms of today's India, sir, maybe another picture, since we have 76 items. What about the hands who made these? ये museum Jaipur में है, Maharaja नहीं साहब. This is of one of the rulers. This is the founder of Jaipur. And the museum is the collection of this family. In 1959, Maharaja Savai Mansingh II, who becomes the first Raj Pramukh when New Rajasthan is founded in 1949, he made his collection, part of the collection, made a trust. So what you see here are materials which are part of the museum. अब आप आइए जरूर आके. This particular document is new. This has just been released. This has just been released. इससे पहले की कुछ किताबें हैं, वो टेक्सटाइल्स पर हैं, वेपन्स पर हैं, फोटोग्राफी पर है, बट ये आपका हाथ थक गया होगा सर.
I want you to connect it to the cultural scenario of, say, Rajasthan, which we can extrapolate into Madhya Pradesh, or in fact any other state.
So what has happened is, when Jaipur was founded, very deliberately the founder sent out invitations, like new cities do, to traders to come and settle, but also to craftspeople. Because craft ke hunar ke bina, the city will never, or a town will never develop in the same way. So this attention to workers using their hands was very strong when Jaipur was made, and that tradition has continued. At that time, they had something called Chattis Karkhana. Now, Karkhana to most people today means a workshop.
Right.
Gadi ka Karkhana. But Karkhana is really like a school of work, an atelier.
More of a skill-based.
Skill-based, so that you have, there is a Tambol Khana, which used to deal with the pans. But there is also a Gunijan Khana, where dancing, musicians, that aspect was given a lot of prominence. They were given awards. There was a Surat Khana, to Surat, which is where the paintings were collected.
Was it there mingling between the musics of Rajasthan and other states?
There was mingling. So again, if we think of our capitals or any urban centers through time, those have often served as a place where mingling happens. Because you then attract people from different areas, including the local areas. Again, think of the old Bombay, now Mumbai, and people going there to act in films since the 1930s. Even when Lahore was a film industry, people were still going to Bombay. So places attract people from around. rural people, people from other states, people from other
That
kingdoms.
means one idea is to develop clusters of cultural
Well,
heritage.
sir, when we develop clusters, you have a lot of plus points. So modern day Jaipur has also become, it's a World Heritage City. We've just got 2019. But it is also a UNESCO creative crafts city. Because of the crafts that it has.
You have a
Normally,
challenge, Miraji.
you see, normally, like the city of Suzhou, which is famous in China for its embroidery, it is known for one type of craft. India, we have multiple crafts everywhere. You have beautiful embroidery here. You have, so many. So in Jaipur also, they have gota work. They have less of embroidery. They have more of printing. They have more of coloring. They have work on metal. They have work on stone. That tradition is linking the founding of Jaipur and what the palaces were doing with present day export even and the skill-based clusters.
I think I'll give you one suggestion is that make a book for how Jaipur attracts people.
We certainly need to do that. That's a very good suggestion. And we can also think of what happens in other cities.
Yeah.
Because the culture is there. Miraji has worked on this for
Yes,
so
he
long.
worked a lot on this.
You see what is happening to Jaipur, which is a World Heritage City now. The old protected area, people are modernizing their houses. So what happens, we have buildings made of chuna, lime, and a lot of stone. Now when you do it with cement, the old chuna and cement do not adhere to each other. So they deteriorate faster. And cement has a shorter life. Our old forts are standing after 1,000 years. Hill forts of Rajasthan have also got UNESCO status, World Heritage. The cement ones do not. But people are changing their houses. When they do that, will the nature of the old city remain? Will it remain a World Heritage City if you take away what makes it heritage? This is a question we need to think about.
That branding is because of that only.
The branding, the relevance, if you take away, so Ajanta caves have World Heritage status. If nature was to do some damage, then that is one thing, then UNESCO status would remain. If we as individuals were to erase the nature of Ajanta, repaint it in modern paint, UNESCO has to take away the status. And that can happen to our old cities if we change the nature of those cities by going in for what we think is development, using modern materials. If you want to do modern materials, you do what your father did. You build outside the modern old city, make a new model city, make a fifth model city. The famous Sheesh Mahal of Amer can be replicated in a film city, so people can go and shoot films there,
Right.
rather than take your cameras into the old small part and with the heat destroy the old, the glass and the paint and whatever is used in those places. So we have to be very responsible how we look after our culture and preserve it for future generations, but also use it as a positive cultural reinforcement or a positive artistic reinforcement for people to want to follow. There is enough ugliness in the world. Let us highlight the beauty, the natural and the other beauty that we have.
So, questions?
So now I open the stage for the questions from the audience. I'm sure there must be some for our speakers and to the discussant. Yes, ma'am.
Miraji might have a lot of questions.
The British Museum also kind of started talking about materiality. So the stories which move around material objects that we have, and the significance and how every material, it is not just one object, but it ties up the culture of several nations also. So some of the objects that they talk about, it goes across continents. And congratulations for this brilliant effort. And Rima ji, the contribution, I think you must have contributed hugely to this. So it's a very nice way of thinking.
Sorry, I do Mahaleshwar,
Okay.
10th century, from near Jaipur. So our collection has very few statues, but we also have this. As I said, I wish I had more copies, and carpets is our strong point, one of our strong points. So as you say, about the cultural, cross-cultural things, because Mughal carpets are there in a big way in the collection. Ji, Meera ji.
The stories also bring people closer to that object.
Yes.
And the culture. So it is, the narration is very critical and important.
So now I'm not sure which image you are seeing of a manuscript, but we have a picture, and now this is a story that my colleagues have told, but I'm going to kind of, with their permission kind of thing, copy it here. Meanwhile, I'll show you something else. One of Supriya Gandhi was doing her book on Dara Shikoh, and my colleague said, come and see our pictures, our portrait of Dara Shikoh, which she did, and then she turned that over. And the script on the back, she said, this is what is very interesting. It is a part out of Jahanara Begum's work, because Dara Shikoh and Jahanara, brother and sister, shared the same spiritual guru, the saint. And it is something that she has written there. So in her script, now just imagine, you would not normally expect to find in texts, because things like this you might look at. But Pothis, our collection is called a Pothi Khan, the archives. So inside Pothis, you don't expect to find, treasures in that way. It's kagaz hai. Kaun padhta hai itne kagaz? Padhte hain. There, I can see a few hands, sir.
Yes, now do we, yes sir, one more question.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Sikandar Malik. I'm a big fan of yours. I'll haunt you after the session. One thing that I keep listening to Rajmata Sahab, and she talks about hoardings in Jaipur. That is one story. But I'm more interested in understanding how Lilypool came into being, and where can one find that magazine? I keep on hunting it, but can't find it when, Jay actually started planning it for Auntie Aisha. And the most amazing thing is that, they say that a pleasure pavilion being converted like that is quite interesting. So,
So this is not Lilypool, but this is some of the things that they were planning. This is our Jaipur house, now the National Gallery of Modern Art, and some plans for it being made in the 30s and 40s.
so the archive at the City Palace retains it, or it's with the thing?
This we have.
Okay, all right.
So your question is very interesting about, the
Lilypool.
coming together of modern
And
Jaipur.
yes.
I think this again, you have a parallel with Bhopal and with other older cities where there were ruling families and which were not part of British India already. And that is modernizing. What happens when you start changing? Now, up till the time of Mansingh II, who comes to the throne as again a 10-year-old in 1922, up till that time, the Jaipur royals, like many, are looking at their own tradition, which is very rich, and exulting in it, talking about it. So, part of the larger thing we can't talk about because of time, but the British, when they were there, Swinton Jacob, Sir Swinton Jacob, starts designing things. He's using this mixture of the British and the Indo-Saracenic and the local style. And they put together something called the Jaipur Portfolio, which is now kind of out of print, but it's available again. Yes. Huh.
And one of those buildings, which is a library, has the folio.
Okay, please share images of the buildings that you have in Bhopal with me afterwards. And anyone will give you my contact and definitely talk to you. Yes, definitely. So, when Mansingh is growing up, you see again 20th century, what is happening? Everyone in kind of urban India is getting, and even for that matter rural undivided India, is getting influences of the English language, because the Sarkari schools also have English to an extent. It may not be the medium of instruction. And the growing middle class is also getting that influence. Rulers certainly do. So he starts looking westward also. And he says, this tradition is good, we celebrate it. But let us also now blend what needs to be blended. So the new Secretariat building is made. It was actually for the Man Guards, Savai Man Guards. It's now our Secretariat for the state of Rajasthan. New buildings are coming in. Jaipur House, as I said, the National Gallery of Modern Art, is built at this time. Lilypool, I don't know where you're going to get that. I would say Auntie Google or Uncle Google is going to be your best bet for being able to find something. Otherwise, archives. National Archives, State Archives, Bikaner State Archives, any archives. And this is probably the right time.
On top of that magazine, landscape and cartoons, and it was inspired by a French villa. So I keep on looking for that publication where on a lot of people hardly find it. Since you come from that point where you haven't reached that archive, that's why I asked, is it available?
What happened again, and this is a story perhaps that happened with other Indian states when they merged with the government of India, that their own archives, in the case of Rajasthan, the archives, the state archives, the Rajasthan archives were created at Bikaner. All right, so like with many places, Rajasthan is roughly the size and shape of France. It's a large area. It had 19 princely states and 2 chiefships when it became one thing from Rajputana. Each of them had their own commander-in-chiefs and their own high courts and their own. So you have to merge those. And one of the ways of payoff kind of things, of balancing, some things stayed in Bikaner, some things stayed in Jodhpur, all the big states got part of it. Jaipur became the state capital. It could have easily been Ajmer, that's a different story. Bikaner archives got the main archives from all the princely states of Rajasthan, barring what they chose to keep. So in the case of the Pothikhana of Jaipur, they have kept material at that time which relate to the Jantar Mantar that Savai Jai Singh made, which relate to a lot of religious type of texts and other texts, some of which are, but the bulk of the material that you are talking about, or the bulk of the administrative records, went to the state archives in Bikaner. That might have happened for MP also, I'm not sure. But some things went to the National Archives. And coming back now, I think this is now the time where we have to start putting together oral histories in a much more comprehensive, as a mission, national mission on oral history, and also look at our archives again. Whatever has not been documented, whatever has been documented, let us start studying it. Yesterday in the evening, I met someone who had started off with a master's in epigraphy, and she was talking of Brahmi. She lives in your city. She's a publisher. But how many of us, I've studied history, I can't read my Brahmi now because I'm out of practice. Okay? How much can we do to keep things alive? Now, there is one issue, and I'm sorry, sir, I'm taking all the time from the questions, and that is people always come up with questions like, this is not in the syllabus. Should we not have this in the syllabus? अरे बेचारा बच्चा का या बेचारे बुढ़े का दिमाग में कितना डालोगे by putting it only in the syllabus? Can we not emphasize wanting to learn? So that then it is not, what do I know about the history of Bhopal in this period? I may not retain it for my exam. But if I'm interested in local history, then I'll be interested in the history of my village. And then I'll be interested in larger histories. When I was doing my own fieldwork many million years ago in archaeology, in the Udaipur, Chittor, that area for our culture, one place I went, they said, "Hamari baudi dekhiye." Now, I don't know what you call them here, but basically bauli, baudi, vav, the different words for a stepwell or this was very narrow. I was in my 20s. These men didn't know, they could not have held on to me, but they were afraid I would fall in, so they were going like, "Madam, sambhal ke." And madam was looking in, very narrow. I think it's stage jitna hoga. All around were Gurjar Pratihar sculpture. Beautiful. And my interest was still, I have to go and see my Palta Gaon, Juno Gaon, Ulta Gaon, Kheda, whatever they, Tambavati Nagri, but this was beautiful. And then they told me a story. So they said, years ago, they had a collector there. They even said which state he was from originally. And they said, we showed him this, and he said, how wonderful, just imagine, your great-great-grandfathers must have sat here in the evening, your great-great-grandmothers and mothers must have taken water from here. So we looked at it with new eyes and said, ye hamara hai. And then several years after, in the 60s that gentleman was there, several years later some pieces went missing. So they said, हमने छोड़ा नहीं. हमने पहले पटवारी को बोला, उसने कहा मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता. फिर हमने सरपंच को बोला. We chased it all the way up. Those statues, this was a time a lot of smuggling was happening. I think it still does with art objects. The statues were then brought and left on the boundary of the village because they made a noise. That man happened to be my father, which is why I knew this. But one individual, you know, all of you are actually the people who are making these changes happen. That one person you influences thousands of people. We are what we are because of the education we have. So each Teacher's Day we are celebrating not just my favorite teacher when I'm in school, because it's fun in school, but we are celebrating that longer tradition of whoever has taught us. And that is the only way we are going to preserve what is left of the past. But we cannot memorize everything and put it in a textbook. We have to be in a position where, if I'm interested, I didn't know about these 4 buildings by Swinton Jacob, but I should then be able to go back and say, I want a picture, I want to know more.
Ma'am, I'm really sorry to be an interruption here. Could we please brief it up? So thank you so much for this amazing session, ma'am and sir. Now I would request Ma'am Meera Das ma'am to please give the mementos to our speaker and the BLF mark to our discussant.
Thank you, Rima, for a very nice presentation.
Meanwhile, we have a quiz question for all of you.
Thank you so much. So, sir, it might take the copy. I'm taking this liberty of doing this in public. Miraji, this book is for you. Miraji is a birthday